The Second Crusade was the second major crusading effort launched from Europe, initiated in response to the fall of the county of Edessa in 1144, to the forces of Zengi, the Turkish Atabeg of Mosul and Aleppo. The county of Edessa had been the first crusader state established during the First Crusade by King Baldwin I of Jerusalem in 1098. However, it was also the first to fall, signaling a need for renewed military efforts to secure the crusader states in the Holy Land. To understand the context of the Second Crusade, one must first appreciate the significance of the First Crusade. The First Crusade was a monumental and unprecedented military campaign that saw European knights and soldiers travel to the Holy Land to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. The Crusade was marked by a series of brutal battles, sieges, and massacres, culminating in the capture of Jerusalem in 1099. The First Crusade had established a fragile foothold for Christian forces in the heart of the Levant. Over the decades following the successful capture of Jerusalem, 4 crusader states emerged: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Tripoli, and the County of Edessa. Each of these states played a critical role in maintaining Latin Christian influence in a region surrounded by hostile Muslim powers. However, the most vulnerable of these was Edessa, isolated and situated far from the other crusader strongholds. In 1144, this vulnerability would be exposed in a dramatic and devastating way, triggering a renewed call for a holy war, the Second Crusade. Edessa, located in the northern reaches of the Levant, was the first crusader state to be established during the First Crusade. In 1098, Baldwin of Boulogne, brother to Godfrey of Bouillon, captured the city from its Armenian rulers and established the county of Edessa. Unlike the coastal crusader states, Edessa was a landlocked territory, surrounded by Muslim-controlled lands, and functioned as a buffer zone between the Latin Crusaders and the Seljuk Turks in Anatolia. This strategic position made Edessa both vital and vulnerable. It was the first line of defense against the advancing Muslim forces from the east, particularly those under the control of the Seljuk Turks and the Artukids. Yet, being so far removed from the other crusader states meant that Edessa was often left to fend for itself, with little hope of immediate military reinforcement from its southern neighbors in Antioch or Jerusalem. The first decades of Edessa's existence were marked by relative stability, but this peace was fragile, and its demise would come at the hands of one of the most formidable military leaders of the time, Zengi, the Atabeg of Mosul and Aleppo. Zengi was a man of ambition, cunning, and brutality. Born in 1085, he rose to prominence as the Atabeg of Mosul and later Aleppo, 2 of the most important cities in northern Syria and Mesopotamia. Zengi inherited a fragmented and unstable Muslim world, where rival emirs and sultans vied for control over the region, often more concerned with fighting each other than opposing the Christian invaders from the west. Zengi, however, had different aspirations. His aim was to unite the Muslim lands under his rule and expel the Crusaders from their territories. Zengi's military campaigns throughout the 1120 and 1130 were marked by both aggression and pragmatism. He captured Aleppo in 1128, making it the center of his power, and spent the next decade consolidating his control over northern Syria. By 1140, Zengi's power stretched from Mosul to the gates of Damascus, making him the most powerful Muslim leader in the region. But for Zengi, the ultimate prize was not merely control over Muslim lands, it was the expulsion of the Crusaders from the Levant. In this context, the isolated and poorly defended county of Edessa presented itself as an irresistible target. By the early 1140, the county of Edessa had fallen into a precarious state. Its ruler, Count Jocelyn II, lacked the military resources and strategic acumen of his predecessors. Moreover, internal divisions within the Crusader states, particularly between the Kingdom of Jerusalem and the Principality of Antioch, left Edessa isolated and vulnerable. In 1144, Jocelyn made a crucial mistake. He left Edessa with a significant portion of his forces to assist the Artukid emir of Diyarbakir, a Muslim ruler who was engaged in a conflict with Zengi. This left the city of Edessa lightly defended, a tempting target for Zengi, who saw an opportunity to strike at the heart of the Crusader presence in northern Syria. In December 1144, Zengi launched a surprise attack on Edessa. The city, already weakened by years of neglect and poor leadership, was in no position to resist a concentrated assault. Zengi's army laid siege to the city, surrounding it with a force that contemporary sources estimate to have been around 10,000 men, though modern historians suggest it may have been larger. Inside the city, the defenders were ill-prepared for such an attack. The siege dragged on for several weeks, during which Zengi's forces relentlessly assaulted the walls and undermined the city's defenses. Zengi's siege tactics were methodical and ruthless. His engineers used sappers to weaken the city's fortifications, and his troops applied constant pressure, launching waves of attacks day and night. By December 24th, the walls of Edessa finally gave way. Zengi's forces poured into the city, slaughtering the Christian inhabitants and looting everything of value. The fall of Edessa was swift and brutal, marking the first major loss for the Crusaders since their arrival in the Levant nearly half a century earlier. For the Crusaders, the fall of Edessa was nothing short of a catastrophe. The county had served as a buffer between the Latin states and the Muslim powers to the east. Its loss opened a dangerous gap in the Crusader defenses, leaving the other Crusader states, particularly Antioch, vulnerable to future attacks. News of the fall of Edessa sent shockwaves through the Christian world. Pilgrims returning from the Holy Land, along with embassies from Antioch and Jerusalem, carried the grim tidings to the courts and churches of Europe. The fall of Edessa was seen not only as a military disaster but also as a spiritual failure, a sign that the Latin states in the Holy Land were in grave danger of being overrun by Muslim forces. Pope Eugene III, who had only recently been elected, understood the gravity of the situation. The loss of Edessa had shaken the confidence of the Crusader states, and without immediate action, the entire Crusader project in the Levant could be at risk. In response, Pope Eugene issued a papal bull, Quantum Predecessores, on December 1, 1145, calling for a new crusade to recover Edessa and reinforce the remaining Crusader states. Quantum Predecessores was a direct appeal to the Christian nobility of Europe, urging them to take up the cross once again and journey to the Holy Land. The document promised the same spiritual rewards that had been granted to the participants of the First Crusade, namely, the remission of sins and eternal salvation for those who fought to reclaim the lost territories. Pope Eugene's call was more than just a plea for military assistance. It was a reminder of the religious duty that Christians had to defend their faith and their fellow believers in the East. The fall of Edessa was framed as a crisis of Christendom, one that required the immediate intervention of Europe's nobility. While the papal bull was issued in 1145, it would take time for the call to reach the courts of Europe, and for the nobility to organize their forces. Over the next 2 years, Pope Eugene and his most important ally, Bernard of Clairvaux, would preach the cause of the Second Crusade across the continent. Bernard, a charismatic Cistercian monk and one of the most influential religious figures of his time, became the face of the crusading movement in Europe. His sermons, delivered to large crowds in France and Germany, were impassioned and persuasive, drawing support from kings, nobles, and commoners alike. In France, King Louis VII was among the first to respond to the call. Deeply pious and seeking both spiritual redemption and political prestige, Louis took up the cross in 1146, followed by a large contingent of French nobles. In Germany, Emperor Conrad III, after initial hesitation, was persuaded to join the crusade by Bernard's preaching. With the commitment of these two powerful monarchs, the Second Crusade was set in motion. In conclusion, we may consider the fall of Edessa in 1144 as a pivotal moment in the history of the Crusader states. It marked the first major defeat for the Latin Christians in the Levant, and exposed the vulnerability of their holdings in the face of a resurgent Muslim power under the leadership of Zengi. The shock of Edessa's loss reverberated throughout Europe, leading to a renewed call for a crusade to restore the Christian presence in the region. As we will see in the following chapters, the Second Crusade would prove to be a far more complex and challenging endeavor than its predecessor. The political landscape of the Levant had changed, and the Crusader states were now facing a unified and determined Muslim opposition. With the armies of Europe once again marching towards the Holy Land, the stage was set for one of the most significant and ultimately tragic chapters in the history of the Crusades.